Good evening. Hello. Welcome back to the Addams family, or the mansion anyways. This is a bit odd because we're at the tail end of this whole series being done, and I figured since we are at the tail end, we might as well go ahead and do something that I've done with another popular game I've done, which is, in this case, Horror Town. If you've seen my Horror Town playthrough, you know when we officially ended the one style of events that I decided to go ahead and make a tier list of some kind. Basically the top, worst, and best of a particular game. Well, I figured as much that since this game is pretty much donezo, that I'd do the same thing here. Except it's going to be a little bit different. You might be asking, how different, Grim? Well, that's what I'm about to tell you. So, here's how it's going to go. Before, with my Horror Town version, what I did was I basically took all the events and ranked them against one another. This time I've decided to do something a little bit different to make it a little bit more interesting that I look at all the years. So that way not all one year is for all one negative and one positive, because then it's just so out of whack. There's one year is popular than the other. So what I did instead was I basically took the top 3 of worst and best of each year and tied them with each other and figured from those lists which was the most popular and worst out of them all. Sounds interesting, right? Yeah, so now we're getting somewhere. But this year, I decided for this particular year, 2024, that I would only pick one of these things. Now, with that being said, there's also a dishonorable mentions and honorable mentions that will be mentioned before. And with that also being said, I will make a mention of something I'm excluding, positive or negative, and I'll explain my reasonings. Now, each of these lists are going to be different, and altogether comes to 13, which is a very particular number that I'm sure the Addams would have loved. So, with that being said, before we jump into our list, let's talk about our dishonorable mention that I'm going to go ahead with as far as leaving out. So this is going to be what we're not ranking, but it's for a negative reason. And that I'm not going to count is the last update we had, which was The Strangest Revenge. The reasoning why I'm leaving this one out is because this is such a mixed roller coaster. There are a lot of positives and a lot of negatives, and I think the negatives, unfortunately, is due to the fact of how this game was ending, as well as other factors that came into it, meaning that there's an unfair bias with this update. We can't clearly go ahead and say what it is. Plus, another reason is that because this is a weird event in its own, it's a big event. None other updates last that long. So it's a bit of fair advantage that there's nothing to compare to because it is the best and worst of that particular version and that year. So that's why it's being excluded, because it's so controversial. And I'm sure you've already watched through the playlist, so I don't really have to go into details of why I feel about it. But with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into our official list. Now, I'm going to be going through this from top 13 to second, and then after I'm going to go for my dishonorable mention. And we're going to go for the worst ones because that's the fun one, and then we go for the best. We ended on a high note. So the dishonorable mentions are going to be events that did not make it to the top 3 of the worst, but I want to make mention anyways because of some sort of negative reception to it. And basically, these are going to be not terrible or awful, but each year will have their own version, and I'll explain why. But this way I try to get all these other stuff here. And if I don't talk about a certain update, just know that means I have no opinions on the matter. It's a A-okay update, right? It's not great, it's not bad. So if I don't talk about an update that I missed, that's why. Okay? Alright, now that we got that out of the way, this is going to be basically part 1. Part 2, I'm going to explain part 2 when we get to there, but anyways, I'm digressing. Let's go ahead and dive into our worst list. Now, I'll make a mention here that the first few half of this, although they are in technically the worst, they're not worse as far as they're awful updates. They're more so they were a lot better ones for that year. Okay? So once I get to a certain update, I'll let you know that that's when it comes to the negatives. I have more negatives than positives. So just know that these are basically good updates, but fell short compared to other ones for that year. Alright? Alright. Now then, let's officially start. This is the Addams Family Mystery Mansion's top 13 worst events that was released ever. Number 13. Romance and Rampage, Valentine's Day 2022. This was a particular interesting update because this was the first time that they actually kept the snow around. For the longest time, this would be the only update that had snow, but why is it considered worse? I think partially it's due to the fact that there were a lot of good updates for 2022, so because of that, it just kind of fell short for how much less stuff there was. Now, to say that this basically is in 13 means that it is the better of all the other ones. The other 12 ones are not as great as this one. And there's a good reason for that. Because for the longest time, this update, I loved the story. I love the idea behind it that, you know, Gomez and Morticia showed their undying love by doing the Tango de la Mort, aka the death tango. Of like, you know, basically you can die during this thing, but if you pass this whole death-defying stunt, you're basically showing how loved your true love is, right? So it's just fine and fancy, funny with that type of stuff there, and interesting enough to see how this turns out. And honestly, I love the skins that were there. I love the actual theme of it, as well as the actual items they got going for it, especially the whole stage they got setting up. And not only that, but it's just interesting regardless. You got to see the creativity when it came to Joan when he was running the show for 2022. And yeah, he only ran for 2022, but even then, I loved his updates. And unfortunately, this was one of those ones that they were a lot more. He did such a good job that there were other better ones. So unfortunately, this fell short because, again, and partially that might also be due to the fact that beginnings of the years tend to be a little bit more harder to kind of set through. Like, you get your footing in there. And it kind of shows a bit. There's going to be another one that's going to pop in later on, spoilers, that will show a bit of that earlier step. But as far as my concern is, this is actually not that bad of an update. It's pretty good for what it is. And honestly, out of all the Valentine's Day updates, this one was more unique as far as the theming goes. And I think they did a good job with just how they set everything up and so forth. Right. So now let's go to our next one. Number 12. Golden Spring, Easter Update 2023. This one was a particular interesting one because this was more of their typical spring update. And it's interesting to say that because it's a mixed, because it was also St. Patrick's Day. It's weird because they had an update with St. Patrick's Day with Easter. It's weird, it kind of tied between each other. And it also kind of came back with the plant update from 2022. So this is a weird mix of things. The story was interesting enough, like kind of continuing from the last update previously from in March. But as far as things go, I don't know what it is. Easter tends to be one of those months. Like, it's not really it's basically just the theming of it, like plants and stuff like that. It's just not really there, man. I'll give it credit. I do like I like the story. I like the items in question, as well as the animations they got going on there. But as far as the update's concerned, there's a lot of stuff that could have been done a lot better. And I feel like, for the most part, it kind of showed itself as being an update that had more theming towards it. I would say that as far as Easter things go, this one seems to be the most interesting of them all, as far as how they've done it. again, I think they did a good job with making it stand out and unique from one another. But then again, it's hard because this felt more like an Earth Day update than it was an Easter update. And I know they try to make it seem Easter with Gomez dressed up like a bunny and having gold eggs, things of that nature. But again, it's just very odd because it's just one of those things that just kind of doesn't work so much. But again, it is interesting for what it was. It's just one of those, it happened. But again, not as bad. So that's why it's at number 12. I think it's really there is because I liked how everything was themed around. The overall theme of it was good. It's just the theme itself was just not my cup of tea. That's all. So there you go. Now, speaking of St. Patrick's, number 11. St. Patrick's Debt, 2013 St. Patrick's Day. This update, oh boy. First of all, the story was really great. I loved how they got it. I loved how they introduced Hunter Goldfinger as a villain. I loved how they set everything up with Fester with his leprechaun loan shark. That was a joke that happened back in 2022, and they just like, yeah, no, you know what? Let's make it a thing. So yeah, they basically turned these guys into like an actual character, and I love it. And for that matter, everything about this seemed so great. But the reason it's so low is because it had one of the missed potentials. They could have had a cool decoration with Hunter. They could have had the stairs looking cool. Instead, it kind of looked bland and basic. And then it's just other things around it that just kind of fell short. Again, the theming of it was good for what it was. It's just the cup of tea of the fact that it's St. Patrick's and it's not really that interesting as far as it's standing out, right? But that's the thing. This type of thing tends to be the most hard to kind of get through. The beginning of the years usually tend to be the hardest to kind of get like an out there update that's like the greatest. So normally what ends up happening is that these things kind of stick around for a while longer than it should be. I think part of the reason why it's low on these lists, if for the worst, compared to the other ones that released that year, is just the fact that there was so much other good content, as well as just the fact that, again, a lot of it was because of missed potential. They could have been much more higher. It could have probably saved itself from not being in the top 3. It might have been just a basic okay update. But sadly, there were a lot of things that dinged it. Like, again, the stairs, the missed opportunities for Hunter decoration, things of that nature. They could have done better with it, but they didn't. So here we are. And honestly, that's basically it. I do love the fact that the lore behind Fester and the leprechaun loan sharks is great. I loved the little storyline they got going on there. Got to see the actual loan sharks themselves and just the story behind it and just how they got away with this whole thing. And again, it's just charming for what it was. But again, it's hard because the theming of it, right? It's just, I don't know. Usually beginning of the years are not really the greatest, sadly. And that's what the theme you're going to probably be seeing. But again, some were better than others. And this still is not that bad. It's just fell short compared to everything else that happened that year. That being said, though, I think we finally now get to our top 10s, as it were, with number 10. War on the Wasteland. New Year's Update 2023. This one was an interesting theme because this was the first update that happened with our new guy that kind of came in that replaced Juan after 2022. And the theming of it was interesting because I knew they were going to do some sort of like apocalyptic kind of like update, but it was odd with the theming of it, especially for January. It is sad that we didn't get to see the snow for that month. It's just like, oh, really? I mean, February I understand, but January? Come on. But nah, they got rid of it, unfortunately. So that's the tool we kind of came with. So that's partially one of the negatives, but I understand. They want to try to make theme with the whole, apocalyptic war, wasteland type of thing. Mad Max style. And I did like the story. I love the fact that he included Agatha into this because she was introduced as a gimmick and then she just became part of the story. It's like, yeah, why not, right? Like, you don't really get to see much of these characters interact with one another, but it's fun when you actually get to see these NPCs and mechanics come in and actually have a part of the story. And, it makes sense. Time traveler, mumbo jumbo type of thing. The what if possible scenario. Again, I feel like this was a bit of a missed opportunity because they could have done some cool stuff with this idea. Like, why not have a portal that kind of spits stuff out? Like, the items you get for the crafting, why not let it be portals spitting some stuff out? It would make sense, but nah, instead they kind of did more of the whole junkyard type of feel. Which, again, is not that bad. It's just the theming of it just kind of feels out of place for a beginning of a year update, but hey, I guess it's like whatever's out is old and coming into new, or something of that nature. But yeah, again, the items and the actual quests weren't that bad. It was pretty decent for what it was, but again, it was just one of those, kind of like, but it works for what it was, right? But there's not much else to talk about for that, but it's basically self-explanatory, right? But the thing is, it was interesting because this wasn't the first time we had this kind of post-apocalyptic kind of event type style. There was another one that is actually coming up as number 9. Paint Patrick's. The first in the Hunter trilogy, let's call it that. And this was when we got introduced to the fact that Fester borrowed money from the loan sharks, leprechaun loan sharks, and now they had to do this whole, we have to hide Fester in green because leprechauns can't see green. So it's like, let's make it fun in a paint battle warfare type of thing, right? And I love the idea behind it, like the whole painting thing. Again, the puns, it's funny. But as far as it was worth for 2022, again, this was one of those interesting things that kind of came through this whole aspect, and honestly, it's just one of those weird. And then again, I just realized I forgot to mention it in the beginning. Again, this is new for me, okay? I'm just going to ramble on and just try to talk about what I liked and what I don't like about stuff. Anyways, I digress. Speaking out to the point, the fact of the matter is, the items in question, as well as the character decorations, wasn't that great compared to everything else that happened that year, especially when it comes to St. Patrick as a whole. It is interesting that it stands out compared to normal ones, so I will give it that. Again, this is one of those, should have been done better, but again, it's just like, it was there. I like the idea behind it. I think it was interesting with the whole aspect behind it, but again, it's just like, it's just the theming of it. It's just like, that's the best way to describe it, but it did come up with some interesting things around it. But yeah, a lot of green paint for this particular update. The stairs was interesting though, I'll give it that, but yeah, everything else about it was just like, it just was there. But non-eventful, but it wasn't bad. But there you go. Right, I guess it's time to come talk about our last update for 2022 as far as the worst thing goes at number 8. The Bitter Blizzard. This was an interesting theme for January because it makes sense to have it be themed to the cold, and this was our first introduction to Juan as far as the update's concerned. Now, as far as I was going to say, this update isn't bad as far as that year went. That year was really big as far as like content stuff goes. It was really top notch. The reason why it is at it where it is due to the fact that a lot of 2022 was hot. Like a lot of updates that were great. This one just fell short compared to everyone else because it's the first new one, and mainly it's the theme of it, like ice and kind of wintry type of thing. There were cool items and decoration that came out of it, but at the same time, it's just ice and themes and just cold winter. It's just like you can only do so much with something like that. And I feel like they did what they could with the theming of like that and have it be more of a wintry update. But again, it's just one of those things that could have done better, but they ended up just working with what they got and went with it, right? And honestly, that's all you can really do about it. Again, not really too bad, but it's not really that great either. But honestly, most of these updates that are in this particular tier list at the moment are more fell short versus being bad, right? These updates were like, I have no negative feelings. It's just like, they were just okay. That's the best way to describe it. Most of them were just okay. Compared to everyone else, like, they were really better, but these fell short. That's all I can simply say about it. But there's not much else to talk as far as this update's concerned, but oh boy, we're getting to the fun stuff, because these next ones I do consider to be bad. So moving on, these updates I don't look fondly over, and you'll see why. Starting with number 7, Jurassic Hunt Easter Update 2024. My god, what an update this was. I loved the idea behind it, the theming of it. It's just like, oh, Jurassic, like a prehistoric park, but with that, like the Flintstones. That would have been cool for an Easter update, and instead of getting like normal eggs, you got like dinosaur eggs, which makes sense. But the story was just kind of like, it was just there. Didn't have really any significance as far as the whole narrative for 2024 went. It was just like, it just happened, right? It's just like they felt like they needed to do an Eastery themed update, and they just had to shoehorn this in. If you removed this out of the whole 2024, nothing of Lost would have happened. And honestly, there's a reason for that. This was the worst update for 2024 thus far, and it shows. And part of the reason is that it felt more like rocks and other crap that didn't feel like anything to do with, like, you have a theme of dinosaurs and you didn't play around with it. You had Agatha be there. You could have brought dinosaurs in there and had the excuse of her messing up about again. But no, instead it's just this dinosaur hunt thing, and Wednesday winning by cheating, and it's just like, it's just there. Like, why? You know, it's like, why bother? The whole thing could have been better, but nah, instead they just kind of worked with what they got, and it just kind of became what it is, and it's disappointing what it is. And honestly, I feel like they could have done more with it, but they didn't. So it ended up ending here. And the thing is, despite that being the case, this was still better because the theming of it was at least more interesting. There was a lot more fleshed out. These are like later on updates, so they kind of had an idea of what they were doing. But still, the items and decorations they got with it were not that interesting. For the most part, some of them were even recycled, but again, it's just like, it was just there. It had nothing to do for itself. It's just meh. But other than that, this is just one of those things that just kind of happened, right? So, Easter, man. I don't know what it is about Easter. It's just like, oh, I'm sorry, spring update, but still, just like whatever you call it. Oh, you know what? Speaking of spring, number 6, Spring Event 2021. Oh boy, what do I say about this one? The first thing is that it was better than the spring update for 2020. Certainly. The idea of Parker going after or making eggs for Wednesday to try to hunt, and you know, the actual items and themes and all that stuff, great. Loved it. I loved the decorations they got going on. I like the animations. I like the little things they kind of got going on, and the contest and things of that nature. Again, all these little things and more. But again, it's Easter. And I don't know what it is, but April updates always are crappy. I can't explain why, it just is. For me anyways, Easter updates, bleh. And this shows. The story was interesting as far as it was going, but then it kind of fell off at some point, and it just, I don't know, it just kind of was there, and it just kind of left, and it's just like, okay, cool, it just that happened, I guess. It's like felt uneventful. It's like, yeah, here's a Wednesday and whatever, he's gonna do a contest for themselves, and then that's it, really. I do like the little puns they kind of got going on there. It's just like, you know, like hiding eggs in the weirdest of places and thinking like, oh, of course, Parker would put it in the nice clean one, you know, to make it stand out, and then she got harder and harder. But, you know, just, it kept going on and on and on. It just never ends. But, yeah, that's all it is, really. But now we're getting to number 5. Valentine's Day 2021. This was far better than the Valentine's Day that came before it in the beginning, but still fell short because the theme of it just didn't fit. I liked the idea what they were going with Morticia and Gomez giving each other gifts, the craftings being that of gifts and things of that nature, but it felt kind of recycled in a way, just because of how they got everything set up, especially since when you first started off, the items that you needed were like the very tail end of the update that people weren't happy about, so they ended up having to change it last minute, and it shows that that was going to be the case, you know. I don't know, it's just one of those weird things that happens, and it's just odd to see how this was placed as it was. I trying to make sense of some of this update stuff, but at the same time it's kind of hard because you kind of think about this and just go, yeah, you know what, that was a thing. It certainly was a thing. I don't know what it was, but that happened, alright. And yeah, it just kind of went from there, and just we went through all that and yet nothing, honestly. But it's meh. This is what it is. It just, that's how crazy it's gotten for me as far as the stuff goes. But yeah, there's not much else to talk about. It's just like, I just don't like the update. It was just there. Again, most of these were just there. Number 4. New Year's 2021. This was our first ever New Year's update and our last New Year's update. I like the idea they were going on about, like, oh, let's celebrate New Year's, like with all the different traditions, the idea behind it. I love the fact that they went with the Roman numeral number of 2021, so it's like MMXX, you know, stuff like that. That's cool. I liked that. That was cool as a decoration piece, and it kind of felt kooky with the Addams as far as things go. But the problem of this is just the theming of it just was crappy. I don't know what it was. It's just like you went from having a Christmas update last year, like the last update was Christmas, then you go to this one and it felt the same like you just saw it before, except it just took the Christmas stuff down and was like, oh, winter, yay. It just, you know, it felt like a part 2, if anything. And it just felt lacking for the most part. Most of these items and decorations were just like okay, and the animations were fine, but at the same time it was just like they were so much better, but yet this just fell short. Again, it's just the beginning of the year. This seems like it's the ones with the most crap, but it's just, I don't know, man. It just felt so meh, right? But that's just how it is. That's how it feels, right? That's the best way to describe it, but there you go. But we've talked a lot about particularly most of these years, except for one particular one. Number 3. The nostalgic event. Anniversary update for 2020. This was an interesting premise. Let's celebrate the year by looking back at all the updates that happened previously, while also paying homage to the Addams Family TV series being back in black and white. I love this idea. I love how they were designing it. I love the decorations. I loved how they were getting stuff for it. but I just had enough of it. I had enough of just how this update was made. The theming of it was so bleak, ironic, I know, but it got to the point where I didn't even bother getting all the costumes. I had to get it later on, thankfully, but it's just one of those things that I just didn't felt bothering to play. It didn't interest me. It wasn't a whole lot there to kind of be like, yes, and that is part of it is because of the whole black and white monochrome type of feel. It was bleak. It could have done more interesting with it. Like they could have gone with, and again, part of it's being spoiled, mind you, but another game, Family Guy First for Stuff, had this idea of actually making the filter black and white for the whole thing. It would have been cool to see that happen, right? And they have yet to introduce the photographer, so I understand that, but it's just one of those, you could have just made the screen black and white and been cool that way, right? It would have been hard, I understand that, but I don't know, it just didn't feel like it. It just felt like half to bake, honestly. And it was one of those weird retrospective updates, but we never really got one of these ever again. It was just one and done, like to celebrate of the fact that this was the. And the thing is, usually these games last for like a year and then that's it. So the fact that it lasted longer is a testament to this game. But imagine this would have been the last update we've gotten. Ironic, I know, compared to what happened recently. But still, that's the thing we kind of got ourselves into. But that's just how it is, right? Anyways, let's go ahead and talk about number 2. Spring Event 2020. Our first ever spring update that was Easter update, but they called it a spring update because they didn't want to saturate anything to do with Christianity, apparently. I don't know what it is. They just didn't want to call it an Easter update. They just call it spring. I don't know why. It's just so odd. And what's even odder is that the whole story, it felt so all over the place. Got Gomez and Morticia's gonna do a date, and they're like, "Oh, it's raining. Oh, shucks." And it's just like, what are you talking about? This is like one of those weathers that'd be like, "Oh, beautiful day. Let's go outside and have a lovely picnic of this rainy morning." You know, but no, they act like normal human beings. They're like, "Oh, rain, ugh, spring, ugh." You know, they could have done something like, "Oh, what, you know." Again, they didn't do anything with it. It's just like it's just there. It felt like they had to force themselves to do an Easter update because they felt obligated to do so. It's like, we need to put Easter bunnies and chickens and eggs, and there you go. That's your all done. That's the premise of this whole thing. And then Grandma kind of goes like, let me do it, and then it just ends. It doesn't have a conclusive end. It just ends. It's just like, yeah, that happened, and then that's it. That's it. That it just ends like that. So. Half to bake, like, God, like, why did you do, like, This frustrates me with how this whole thing kind of went about, but again, it's just like, just, that's the best way to describe it. I don't know what it is. You just look at these updates, like, watch them back, and you understand my feeling, because I was so not involved with this. I got everything, though. I'll give it myself that, but I don't know what it is. It's just, I can't remember anything good about it. It was so bleak. It's just so dumb. It could have done more, but no. It's just, again, April. I don't know what it is. April just sucks. Right. Anyways, before we get to our number 1 worst update compared to me, for my opinions, anyways, I might as well go ahead and talk about the dishonorable mentions. Now, I'm going to go through this by each year, going from the beginning of this year all the way down to 2020. So just know that these have no particular order of this is best or worst. Just know that this didn't hit the top 3, but it was under the middle of the road, if that makes sense. Okay? Okay. So these are some stuff that didn't make it to the top 3 list, but I wanted to talk about regardless because they were interesting in its own right. So here are some footnotes about this. So for 2024 Creepy Championship, our first kind of Olympic update, it was interesting for a theme. I liked the idea, the premise behind it. I thought it was kind of cool with how they had everything set up, but I don't know, it just the theme of it was just kind of like not for me. I'm not like into sports and this stuff like that, so this was like but again, not too terrible, but it was something to mention because it was kind of like a not kind of thing. Like I didn't really like it type of stuff, but I digress. 2023 Folktale. This was interesting as its premise. I like the idea behind it. I like the area of folklore kind of done in the style of a camping update, but it's weird that you do it in September and not in June, and then have the June update, which is school, for September. It's like you just watch them screens like these are opposite. Like again, Addams, opposite land, but again, it's just like it just that's the best way to describe it. Is just the theme, that's my feeling behind it. If I can describe a feeling, that's how I describe it. I don't know. You just look at the update and you just go, like that's the best way to describe it. All right, so this next one's gonna hurt. 2022, Wednesday in Wonderland. This hurts. Why did I put in this honorable mentions? A lot of it is wasted potential. I loved that. Out of all the April updates, it was probably the highlight. I love this one. But that being said, the problem why this was here was because of the whole forcing an exclusive item behind a 3-pay paywall with another 3-day paywall. So you get this on an animation for Wednesday. The only saving grace for that was that you got to see a preview of it in the other mansion that the team at Pixowl provided. If they didn't do that, that would be horrible. Like, but yeah, they never did this ever again, thank God. But that just kind of shows you. But yeah, I mean, as far as an Easter update goes with the Alice in Wonderland theme, really good. Again, it wasn't best, but again, there were other better ones, and it shows. This one was just kind of like a, but whatever. 2021, Horrible Sounds. The idea behind classic versus modern, or I guess rock in this case, versus classical music and whatnot, is an interesting premise. What was more interesting is the fact that the reason I'm mentioning this is because this was the first time we heard interesting, unique music, which is like, ooh, I love that. That was a interesting, like a music update with a new music track. Ooh, I love that. Oh, catchy. I love that. It's very modest and stuff. But again, it's just like, it was just there. It was unoffensive, but at the same time, it was just kind of okay. And it kind of shows. But that's just my opinion. And last but not least, for 2020, Crow Camp. This was your typical, June update requires camping update, therefore Crow Camp. And again, this follows the same problem as the spring update for that year. They were like, it's raining, can't go do anything outside. What do you mean? That's the perfect time to do anything, right? They were the opposites, but no, instead they're like, they had a brain fart for a moment and be like, we're normal people. No, we're the Addams. But no, instead they do this whole camping thing indoors, and you got to learn a little bit more behind like a crow camp. This is an interesting idea. Like, what if what if Addams did a camping update? So that was that. But yeah, just whatever, really whatever. But yeah, those are my dishonorable mentions. But now, without further ado, my failed attempt at the rim shot, or what do you call the drum roll? Let's talk about the worst of the worst. Number 1, the worst update, in my opinion, that this game ever made was Valentine's Day 2020. The second update we officially got for this game. Why? For a few reasons. Number 1, this was the first time that I saw that it felt so unfinished. Look at any of the title cards and you have this nice art style and things of that nature. Yet you look at this update and it's like 3D models. So crappy looking. It's like so, like, what happened there? They didn't get the artists to do it. Like, they didn't do anything for January, and yet this is their, like, what's the excuse for this? Then again, the theme, Valentine's Day. Oh, Gomez forgot a present for Morticia. Here's some Valentine's, like, we need Valentine's Day themed stuff. Here you go. Here's all the Valentine's Day themed stuff. There you whatever. But the biggest offense to this update, and what really pissed me off, and everyone off, was this whole... We got used to the idea of, okay, so they have this whole... unlock 3 bundles, and you get one interesting prize for free. Like, the first one was a Lurch costume, which was exclusive behind a 3-byte paywall. But it was like, if you want it, you can get it. It doesn't drop you anything unique. It's just like, it tells you the common items. But it's like an interesting animation you could get for Lurch with a costume. So it's like, okay, sure. This one, though? Oh, what's that? Oh, the most interesting character, the one character that everyone loves, Thing? Yeah, remember him? Guess what? Screw you. You buy 3 bundles, please, and you get him. Who got to do one animation, which is doing the can. I hope you like that. It just, that rubbed me off the wrong way, and a lot of people off the wrong way. As soon as we saw that, I was like, no. And that's partially why this whole grain negative moment is just like, nah, never again. And mind you, they did do exclusive things behind paywalls, like especially like something I forgot is Socrates was introduced back in the nostalgic event, and that was behind the 3-thing paywall. In fact, the costume skin was required in order, like, to get his costume skin you also have to buy the 3-pack, but you get him through all 3. So that was that baloney. But then again, it's just like, just had a rough taste in our mouth. This is the first time we saw this, and since then, they've never done this type of style. 2020 was those experimental years, and this certainly was one of those. Yeah, we'll never do this again type of thing. Most of the time, they kind of kept it through one of the bundles, and that's it. They rarely would just put it in behind a 3-thing paywall, but, again, Thing was one of those more mainstream characters, and yet he's been exclusive behind an event limited time character paywall, which sucked. Because, Thing is a classic character, and yet no one can get him. The only time we got him for free was, ironically, the last update. And even then, it's just like, why? It just felt like a slap in the face, if anything. But, ironic, because he's a hand, he can slap you in the face, but... yeah, there you go. So yeah, that's roughly my overall mindly blank ramblings as far as what I felt were the best, the best of the worst ones for now. And yeah, you could see where I'm going with this. Like, if you could look at my whole update as a whole, you can understand, oh yeah, I could see this and see these being the worst one. It's like, compared to everything else we've seen, it certainly shows, but still, it's like it could have been better. Anyways, with that being said, now we go on to the best ones. But that's for next time. That's right. We're splitting this up into 2 parts. So the next part is going to be the best updates, in my opinions. So same format, but different style. Now we're going to the positives, no more negatives. So negatives all power. And negatives, go away. All out the door. Now it's positivity time. Let's celebrate the Addams for what they were. And that not everything is bad. It's ironic because they're always loving the bad, but you get the idea. Anyways, with that in mind, I've been Grim, and this has been the negatives, the worst updates that this game has ever launched. Until then, see you in part 2 to the best ones, and celebrate it on a high note. But yeah, for now, bitter notes. Enjoy that bitter coffee. It's...